Good evening, everyone. It is Sunday. That means Unlock the Middle is going live with a headline show. We've got an amazing guest tonight in Kip Shubert. Thanks for joining us tonight, Kip. How are you this evening?
I am doing fantastic. It's good to see you guys, and I'm thankful and grateful to be on with you.
Awesome. Well, it's exciting to have you in. You've got quite a story, and it's quite inspirational. Before we jump in and get our interactions together, Josh, how are things down in Texas for you, my friend?
All good, nice and hot. We'll ship it over to you guys. I see you got a like a king's pool back there. I'll take the heat
Yeah,
and jump in your pool right there. So things are
Yeah,
going great here.
that would be the virtual background, a nice air conditioned bedroom that I'm not allowed to show live on air. Dean's in the background. He's working on some lighting right now. He'll join us in a couple of minutes. But, Kip, as we sit down and know about you and your podcast, educators who follow you might know a little bit about your story. But if you could share a little bit about your background in education and what taught you, what you taught as a teacher to the different roles and where you are now.
I started straight out of college, but actually I graduated in the middle of the year, and so I started jumped right into took my the guy student taught with was one of the big time football coaches in Oklahoma named Mike Little, Putnam City North, and I student taught underneath him, and so he moved to a different district at Christmas, and they brought me in to run the PE classes. So I started back in the early '90s. I've been in it for 31 years. Um, Mainly taught seventh grade and eighth grade social studies, and been a high school soccer coach. And I've done that in districts in Oklahoma City and in the Tulsa area. 2 years ago, during COVID, me and my wife always vacationed up here in the mountains in Colorado, where I am now. And our plan was when we were retired to buy an RV bus and come up here and just travel and do our thing. But when COVID hit, one day we kind of looked at ourselves and were like, what are we doing? Are we just living to pay bills and work till we get to retire? Then who knows how long we have till we die? Why don't we just live big and dream big and do it now? And so we just sold our house and moved up here. And I had some friends up here, a guy by the name of Steve Wolf, who has Wild Heart Teacher and used to be a superintendent here in Woodland Park. And then the high school principal, Kevin Burr, was a longtime friend of mine. And so came up here and started teaching middle school social studies. And they taught me out of retirement and back into high school soccer coach. And then, then I got into the podcast and writing a book and just trying to share my secret sauce, those ingredients that are in our story that really make us authentic and real relationship builders in the classroom or on the athletic field or with staff and students. So I'm up here in Woodland Park, Colorado, about 8,500 feet. Never gets above 75, 80 degrees. Not like Josh down there in the Dallas area. And just loving life and trying to make a difference with each day that I've got.
Awesome. Awesome.
Hey Kip, before we get into that secret sauce that you're so well known for, I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
As an educator, we all get more often than not always, more often than not, someone inspires us to become that educator. Someone lit the fire, an event, whether it be negative or positive, but someone lit that fire so that we become an educator. So this is a two-part question for you, Kip. Who inspired you, either way, positive or negative, to go into the teaching field? And question number two, currently, right now, after these last three nonsense years, who keeps that fire going for you?
The first one is my dad. My dad was actually at one point in time a minister. He still does some of that part time, but he also was an educator and a basketball coach for a long time. And so, from the earliest that I can remember, I wanted to be just like him. And so, there's a lot in my story that revolves around him, but I consider him my hero, and he's really why I actually went into school. I went into school to become a professional soccer player. I didn't have any interest in getting an education. I had to do that on the side to play soccer, and so um, I was going to be a youth minister. Uh, what I initially went in to do, and I just in the life I was living, and I love to have a good time. Um, I was a go big, go home kind of guy in everything I did, and so I just didn't think that I could pull it off. And so teaching was the next best thing, and he was a teacher as well, and so um, I kind of fell backwards into that. Um, but my dad has always been a huge inspiration to me as a man, and really as a coach and a teacher, and just as an impactor of young people. And then currently, in the last 3 years, I would say definitely Steve Wolf. Um, uh, he's a guy. I got to tell you the story real quick, and I'll make it fast. But when
Hey,
we came
hey,
up,
hey, Kip, no, nice and slow, brother. Just like Principal Cafellas describes Luthor, I'm gonna sing this slow. Don't, there's no rush, brother. It's
I
your show.
I got you. Um, but when we came up here to vacation, me and Steve had connected on Facebook, and like so many of us did during COVID, right? And so, Steve goes, "When you come up on vacation, let me know, and we'll meet up in person and all these kind of things." And he was the superintendent up here in Woodland Park, and so I get up here, and me and my wife are at one of the little kind of roadside cafes on the highway that runs through town. It's 8,000 people, and I messaged Steve and said, "Hey, we're at this place," and I'm not within 5 minutes. He shows up behind me. He's like, "Hey," and big hug, and so we talk for a while. Then he's got to go, but he's like, "You're coming to my house. Here's where it is. I'm making hamburgers tonight." And so he leaves, and me and my wife are like, "Is this guy for real? I mean, should we go to his house? What do we do?" But we went to his house, met his wife, his in-laws, um, and then before we left, he goes, "Be at my house at 6 a.m. in the morning. We're hiking the Crags, which is a famous trail that goes high up into the mountains here outside of Woodland Park, and has great views." And so we were just kind of like, "Oh my God, he's going to take us up there and kill us. What is this guy?" But he's just one of those guys that he just collects people, is what he says, right? And he just collected us and brought us in, and I mean, he was just bam, bam, bam right off the bat. And so he's been a huge inspiration to me. He's gone through a lot of struggles like myself, and turned them into strengths, which with his Wild Heart teacher retreats that he does now. And he just always inspires me to just give to people and just love people. And then the second one would have to be Pep, Darren Peppard. He's been my results coach for a couple of years now. He's my publisher with the book, and we've met in person several times. But going into this conference that I just came back from, 1,600 people, the Hilton Anatole in Dallas. I'm going by myself, not with a faculty group, not with a student leadership group. A little bit nervous about it, uncomfortable. Gonna have to be around all these people that I know online, but I haven't met in person yet. Kind of gets me out of my comfort zone. And Pep just brought me right under his wing the whole time and made sure I was connected. And here I'm at this place. Come meet us here. Where are you at? I'm gonna, be with me. And he's just been a great guy to model myself after, and to help me get into the speaker space and to the author space where I want to be. So, Steve Wolf, Pep, and my dad.
Got it. Hey, you know what? I feel you right now. When I came back from Denver, all these people I've met on Twitter at NASSP, they're
Yeah,
like, "Hey, Josh, I'm like, you look different."
yeah.
It's something else. It's something weird. So yeah, I feel you, Chris.
Absolutely. Kip, great explanation of the mentors and the influences that have really driven you. One of my early on mentors as an educator, used 3 words: relationship is primary. And, I sit down and think about your book, and there are 2 key points we're going to take a look at now. Relationships are crucial, and what we say about ourselves.
Right.
Those 2 points, if you could talk in a little bit of detail about the power of those to the audience, and let folks in on a little bit of the secret sauce.
All right. Just of course, I mean, relationships are primary. To me, it's relationships, relationships, relationships. If what we do as educators and what we do as human beings, I think, is all predicated on relationships. I've had a few educators just in promoting the book and talking about what I talk about, kind of push back at me and say, I'm not their parent. I'm not their mentor. I'm not their model. I'm an educator. I teach curriculum. I teach content. And my response to them is, well, you probably don't teach it very well because, as we all know, kids and staff members I mean, they're not going to remember so much what we taught them. They're going to remember how we made them feel. And as Dr. Joseph Filippo, I heard him say yesterday, every every moment matters because every moment could be that connection that you make with someone that they're going to remember for the rest of your lives, and so or their lives. And so I think relationships are key to what we do. And for me, in the secret sauce, the most important relationship was the one with myself. And so for 46 years, through my parents divorced when I was in seventh grade, back in the late 70s, 1980. That wasn't the common thing like it is today. And so, I think we do kids sometimes a disservice because it's become so common. We really don't think about it that much anymore. Oh, your parents are divorced like everybody else. But I think it's just as devastating today as it was for me in 1979. And that left a big hole in me. And so my dad was my hero. He did some things that left us kind of on the outs, and he moved to a different state, and started kind of another family. And it's like I thought something was wrong with me, and it was my fault. And that just kind of parlayed into a lack of self-esteem and a lack of confidence and the lack of ability to actually build healthy relationships, because I thought that a relationship was supposed to fill me up. And so I sucked the life out of every relationship that I had, no matter what kind it was. And, again, not being able to have that relationship with myself and love who I was caused me to seek that out in the wrong things and the wrong people. And, I remember I started drinking alcohol. I was a pretty good kid in high school, didn't do any of that, but I got into college and started partying. Didn't party too hard because athletics and playing soccer was my thing. That was the one thing that I knew when I stepped on the field that I was good at. And I have the awards and all those kind of things to prove that. And that's when I felt like I was invincible. But when the soccer was over and didn't have that anymore, the coaching and teaching, the wife, the kids, it wasn't their fault, but they could not fill that hole that was inside of me. And I thought they should. And so, I was getting frustrated and discontent and restless with all those kind of things that really wasn't their fault. It was mine. And I began to drink more and more. And from about my early to mid 20s to 46, I drank to get drunk is what I did, because it helped me to escape all those feelings of inadequacy, those feelings of not being worthy of what I was doing. And I was a very successful teacher, and I was a hugely successful soccer coach at the club level and the high school level. But I still doubted that I was worthy to do that. Somehow it was luck. I always needed something else or somebody else to make me feel okay and to validate me. And I hit 46 years old and I was drinking every day. The year I went into rehab, I tell this story sometimes when I speak, is I'd missed 47 days of school before spring break got there. And and my principal was a friend of mine. So, some people thought he maybe enabled me in some ways. I look back at it now and he saved my life, saved my career. But I would call him up on a Sunday night and go, Cecil, I'm not coming in until next week. So see ya. And he would take care of it. But he would reach out to me and like, what can I do? How can I help you? And I had friends around me trying to help, and teachers on my teams there in Yukon, Oklahoma was where I was at the time, trying to help. And when you're in that state, you don't see anything else other than what everybody else is not giving you or doing to you. You never see it as your own thing. And so, I learned the hard way that relationship with yourself is the most important thing to have. And really, if you think about it, when we talk about relationships, right? how can we build authentic, real, life-changing relationships with kids if we can't do it with each other? You know, before we take care of kids, we got to take care of one another. And so I had people that helped me along the way to be able to see that I was the greatest miracle in the world, and I could learn to love myself and who I was. And once I was able to do that, then I was able to start seeing that life wasn't about Kip, wasn't about all that was happening to me. It was, what could you do with what you have to impact other people? That's where your power is. And so that humility was one of the first ingredients that I learned, and what I call the secret sauce was that it's what I'm doing, the coaching, the teaching, anything else that I'm doing is there to make someone else's life better. And when you do that, all those things that I sought in drugs or alcohol or women or whatever else, all those things that I wanted, that is when those things came back to me. And so that was a powerful lesson for me.
Wow.
And Kip, and I'd like to tell the audience, make sure that we'll do this at the very end, but
Yeah.
it's crucial that you all listen to this man's story. I've heard the majority of his podcasts, and I love this guy. He's a great guy, and it really is
Thank you,
a
Josh.
kind of strength. I really care about your struggles because as a teenager, I did a lot of the stuff that you did, but that's a separate conversation right now. So based on your adversity in life, and you overcame it, and you overcame a lot.
Yes,
That's why
sir.
people need to hear that podcast. Um, how can someone use this adversity? How can someone use this horrible addiction, whatever you want to insert in the semantical term? How can this become a strength for self? Because, like you said, you can't love others if you don't love yourself. So, how
Right.
can that struggle become a strength?
I think the first thing, it comes down to choices, right? Um, our choices, our power of choice is one of the greatest powers we have, and I think we overlook it. But we have to choose how we see the adversity, how we see the struggle. If we see that, like when I was heavy into addiction, I saw it as everybody was trying to keep me down, and it was all about what everybody else was doing to me or not giving to me. It was never anything to do with me. And um, after I got through that initial um, struggle with alcohol and began to get into recovery, you know, it's all about that mindset and choosing to see those adversities as your advantage, those struggles as your strength. But when you do that, it's not like it's going to happen, you know, overnight. It's not an overnight thing. It's a process, and so you can't look at the outcome. You can't look at the final outcome or the final product. You've got to stay focused on the process. And for me, it was staying in the moment, one day at a time, and trying to find out and to seek, what is this adversity, what is this struggle trying to teach me, because in every single one of them there is a strength, but I had to choose to see it that way first. Then my mindset had to be one of a positive framework, where each morning I would say, I get to, I don't have to. And I had to stay involved. I think the key is staying involved in service. I had to keep giving back. I had to serve to others. I had to take whatever I had at the time and just continue to keep climbing, as I say all the time, um, and give back to others, because then that's going to be that strength within that struggle is going to be revealed to you. It might be perseverance. It might be grit. It might be grace. It might be forgiveness. It might be humility. That was the first one I learned. It could be self-love. But you have to want to see it first. And again, I think it starts with choices, and then it's just staying true to the process, and just never. One thing I say is, when you don't quit, you win. Like with my daughter, for instance, when I was in rehab, my breaking point was, I thought I was going into rehab to drink like a gentleman. That I would come out and I could be able to party, smoke, do whatever, and I wouldn't get in trouble. I could go to school and I would be a good guy. That's what I thought I was going in there for. I thought it was going to be a bunch of guys and girls like you see on TV, right? And it wasn't. It was blue collar, white collar CEOs, principals, teachers, highway patrolmen. I mean, down to your busboys and fry cooks. It was all in between. And but I learned about a week or so into rehab, my counselor calls me in, and when she called me in, I thought that I was going to get to go home because I had done recovery the best of anybody there. I went big and went home, right? And but the look on her face when I opened the door, I could tell something was really, really wrong. And she set me down and she says, Kip, uh, your family didn't want to tell you this before you came in because they didn't think you would go. And they were right. I wouldn't have. But you have lost all parental rights and custodial rights to your daughter. And she was 5. So, at that point, I was going to grab my stuff and go kill myself. I had tried a few times before and failed. This time I was going to succeed. I stopped at a chapel on the way out to my room and went in and sit down, and I remember just crying. And I think one of those things we just talked about as far as finding strength in your struggle is you've got to be able to release things and let things go. And for the first time, I probably cried. I don't know how long I cried, but it felt like every negative thing that I'd ever thought about myself and every negative, awful mistake that I had made just came pouring out of me. And I said one word, and that was help. And I felt just a warmth come over me. And I stood up and, whether it was the universe, whether it was an audible, to me, it was audible. All I heard was, you're the greatest miracle in the world. We got work to do. Right. And so from that point on, I've been sober, but I knew I had to, the first part is I had to get clean and sober for Camden. I had to take care of me, which I had to love me. I had to do a lot of work on me so that I could get her back. And it took 3.5 years for me to see her again. And you talk about struggle and adversity. And a lot of times wanting just to throw your hands up and say, how good of a sober guy, God, do I have to be? I said that a lot. But I knew if I stayed true to the process and I just kept going, that I would win. And I didn't quit. And 3.5 years in and fighting, her mother and the powers that be, I finally got a call because her mom was starting to date a guy that was in recovery. And he encouraged her that not to keep her from me. She called me and said, hey, you want to see your daughter? And I was like, hell yeah, where now? And that weekend I drove to Oklahoma City probably faster than I've ever driven before and didn't get a ticket and got there. And things have been great since. So, it's just sometimes those lessons can take a long time. But that taught me about perseverance and grit to where now when things come up, I remember that lesson and how hard it was. And I can't quit. I couldn't quit if you asked me to, because the things I face now don't seem anything like that. It's not near as hard. And if I can go through that for 3.5 years on a daily basis, I know I can go through anything. And so again, that becomes part of that's an ingredient to my secret sauce is perseverance. And so how I use that is I try to model that and teach that in lessons in the classroom and on the soccer field. Because if I don't, then all that I went through and all that my kids went through, what does it matter? I had to make meaning of it somehow.
100%. Kip, my, blessed to you for just being able to share the power of these experiences, and the influence that it had on you yourself, your own self relationship. That's really key. We are all cultivated by relationships and connections that we have, and you've got support in your world. And you may have had some negative influences in your world. You probably still have some negativity in there. But if you could talk a little bit about how we can keep that negative and toxic relationship in our lives, how we can manage that, and also, what the impacts are if we don't manage it properly.
Yeah, I think toxic people, negative relationships, toxic relationships are like a poison. And it may not get you right away, but eventually it will impact and infect your mindset, those choices I was talking about. And if all you see and all you speak and all you believe are negative and toxic things, then you yourself become that. It's one thing I learned early on in my rehab that what you speak, what you believe, what you say is what you become. And so, I have to do this, and it's difficult. Setting boundaries is important, and the boundaries are for you. They're not for the other people. I've had to do that with my siblings. And one of the things when you come through an addiction or something like that that's similar, a lot of times the hardest people to connect back with and to, I don't know, get on the same page with are your close family members. But they see me as doing something negative to them, and I'm not. I love them with all my heart. If they needed me, I would be there in a second. However, I choose not to interact um, in their toxicity and their negativity, and I don't have to. It doesn't feed my soul. Whatever I let into my soul, whatever I let into my heart, is what's going to come out. And so I choose not to surround myself with people that are toxic to me and negative. And that means, like with them, it's if they're going to criticize and critique and bring negative things to the things that I do as someone in recovery. Um, but even but I think as an educator, um, we all have those people, right? Where, um, and who, and you could think of the name like that. But if you go to the teacher's lounge or to the staff lounge, you're going to hear this, yeah, nah, 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 you're going to hear that negative, that stuff. And I don't even go to the lounge anymore. I have kids in my room. We have a lunch crew because it's positive. It's not negative. And, but there's been people at school that I've had to, you can still love them. You can still be their friend, but I keep a boundary with them. And so I even told one lady that this year, I was like, she was real negative about some things happening in our district. And I don't blame her, because there's some really, really bad things going on and just craziness. And it just consumed her. But that's all she ever talked about was the negative things going on. And I finally said, you're going to have to let it go. And she did not like that. She went like Ruth from Ozark on me, because she's so consumed with everything that's negative and toxic going on in our district and our building that she's now infected with it. And so love her to death. And in the hallways, I give her hugs and we have fun and stuff. But when it comes to like coming in my room or whatever, I make sure I'm not in there when it's downtime, because I know they're going to come in there and be negative. And so I just stay out in the hallway, with kids. But it comes to those negative, toxic relationships. It's boundaries, number one. It's like, if this happens, then this is the consequence, and you have to stick to it, no matter how hard it is. And the second one is letting go of things. You got to release it, because if you hold on to it, it's going to get you too. And so, the things I don't control and the people I don't control, I don't hold on to. And I try to see the good in everybody and stay above the line. Doesn't mean we all could try to do that. We're all not going to be successful. We all falter at times, but it's just kind of a daily practice that I keep in place, that I've got to surround myself with people that are positive, and they're going to help me rise. Guys like Steve Wolf, guys like Pep, guys like you. I've got to surround myself with people that are going to fill me with good. Because if I don't, I'm going to be going down a rabbit hole with all those educators and teachers that we all know, and they're all great people. They just let that infect them and poison them, and they can't see anything else but the bad. And so I don't want to be that guy, because if I'm always negative about what's going on around me, how can I impact kids in a positive way? Right? They're going to pick up on that negativity. So I hope that answered your question with that. It's just, again, it's just, and it's hard because you don't want to be the guy you don't want to be the ass, right? But and they look at you when you put boundaries in place with people, they look at you as the bad guy, and that's on them, not me. I got to do what I have to do for my sobriety, but I got to do, most importantly, what I got to do for me to make the impact that I'm supposed to. So all that crap that I did to my kids and that I went through means something, and so I just can't go there.
And you know what, Kip? I mean, that's awesome. And the way that you were able to stay true to self. Just and real quick, a big shout out to Don Parker. If
Yeah, I
you
see him.
guys make sure you give him follow that guy. He'll bench press you, I'll squat you. That guy, but also he has a spirit of a lion. He's an amazing guy. Thank you for being here, Doc. Just real quick, hey, Kip, as as you overcame this, break it down a little bit more. Now that you've overcome, and you never overcome alcoholism, you never do. You never overcome that drug part. I stopped drinking when my first kid was born. I understand you, and something has to keep us anchored down.
Right.
So once we have that, and we've overcome that drastic part of our life, how does that help your present and your future?
Man, it fills you with it, you go from complete darkness to light. You go from always feeling hopeless to feeling hopeful. And I think the two biggest keys for me, because it's that past life, I don't live there anymore. One of the reasons I stopped going to Alcoholics Anonymous, I think it's a great program and it did a lot of good for me, but it was time for me to leave when I did, was because when I had to say, I'm Kip, I'm an alcoholic every day, that's not who I was at the time. And I wanted more. I wanted everything out of life that I could get, because for 46 years, I freaking just threw it away. And so I had to make the most of what I had left. And I think being in recovery, because it's a day at a time thing, I don't think about the drinking. I don't think about the drugs. I don't think about that past life at all. There are boundaries that I have, even with my wife, when it comes to having a glass of wine at dinner, like she does sometimes, and that we put in place as safeguards for me. Not that I feel like I'm going to drink again. It's just I don't want to be around it because it has a negative, toxic connotation for me. But I think the two things that it's given me that allow me to do what I do each day and seek that positive mindset and to make a difference on a daily basis are, I know how to have healthy relationships. I know that I have to give to them what I want in return, not the other way around. And that I'm there for my relationships. They're not there for me. And the second one, I think, is I finally found purpose. And I know that purpose and that why word, sometimes I don't like using them because it gets cliche and it gets overused, I think, at times. But I had no idea why the hell I was even here. I thought I was here to be served by people, recognized as a coach, recognized as a teacher, recognized as a soccer player, recognized as whatever, right? And so when I was able to get that relationship right with myself and understand who I really was, I could look myself in the mirror and I could answer the question, who are you really? Good, bad, and the ugly. It opened up my eyes to my why, which is to lead and love other people to believe and discover that they are the greatest miracle in the world. Period. It's written in my classroom. I have it posted. It's something that I look to every day. And that keeps me moving forward, even when we have crappy days. And that's one thing I want people to understand. Just because you're a positive mindset guy or gal, or you're searching to make a difference every day, and you talk about positivity and this, it's not toxic positivity. I have my negative days. I have my bad days. I have days where I feel like I'm going to go to a cabin in the mountains by myself, isolate, and never come back. Because I like that. It's comfortable for me. I know what's going to happen, right? I can protect myself. It's a coping mechanism. There's days, and I have a lot of days like that. But that's not who I am. If I go up in the mountains and isolate, then how am I going to impact young people? How am I going to impact staff around me? How am I going to impact the adults that need to hear our stories? And so, those relationships and knowing my purpose are such big things that I've learned through those struggles that I face, especially the addiction, that today I can lean back on, and it keeps me moving forward. Because there has to be some meaning for what happened to me, right? There has to be some meaning what I did to my kids and what I did to myself, whether they're talking to me at the present time or not, or they're happy with their dad or not. I've got to make meaning of it, so that way I honor them in some way, you know. And I just got to do my part. And I've learned in our relationships, what the other person does is on them. I can't control that. So if someone's angry at me, I have to let them be angry, and I give them that space to be angry. If they're loving me, I let them love me, you know. So, yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, Kip.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Chris?
Kip, what you said a little while ago, and just kind of drove home right now, the power of those relationships and other people being responsible for themselves, right? You can't control them. It's their reality. You've just got to, stay in your lane and focus on your elements of control. But there is a bridge that are between those two parties, and that in some ways with your personal situation, there's a big word in there called forgiveness.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that the power of forgiveness, and how impactful that really is in driving your why and driving your purpose.
Yeah. I mean, it's if we're not humble enough and courageous enough to forgive other people, then how can we expect to be forgiven, right? And the stuff that happened between me and my dad, I learned a huge lesson. It's in my book, about the power of forgiveness, and it's one that I think a lot of people miss, and I know I did for the longest time. But my dad had asked for forgiveness for what had happened between us, numerous times, and I said I gave it to him, but I didn't. And so for the longest time, until I got into recovery, I made my dad pay, whether it was keeping him last on the list at Christmas, keeping my kids from seeing him, unless, I mean, he was always last at everything. Not calling him on Father's Day, not calling him on his birthday intentionally. I didn't just forget, I did it intentionally. I did everything I possibly could, um, to make him pay, to punish him. And it's been 4 or 5 years ago, but we were sitting in the coach's office at my soccer stadium in Sapulpa, Oklahoma, and my good friend, assistant coach named AJ Clarecoper, said to me, he goes, "So I see you're just thriving. You're doing." He was, giving me a bunch of, pumping me up and saying how good I was doing and how proud of me he was and all this stuff. And he goes, "I think there's one thing that you haven't quite got yet." And I was like, "What is that?" He goes, "Your dad." I'm like, "What about him?" Me and my dad had kind of made peace, and we had become closer, and I felt like I was getting my hero back, right? And but AJ said, "Have you ever asked your dad for forgiveness?" And I was like, "What do you mean, me ask him? I didn't do anything to him. He's the one that hurt me. He's, I'm not the one that hurt him." And he said, "But didn't you? What about all those times that you told me about that you made him pay?" And he's like, "I want you to go home and call your dad and ask him for forgiveness." And so that's what I did. I went home. Didn't really want to, because I didn't think that I needed to, but I was going to trust. I trusted AJ, so I went home, called my dad, asked him for forgiveness. He was just like, "Son, it's okay. It's no big deal. It means a lot to me, but thank you." But the ironic thing was, all that hatred and anger and resentment, along with the guilt and shame that I was carrying from way back when I was 11 years old, was gone like that. And me and my dad were finally able to be free of all that crap that happened in our past. Because he'd asked for forgiveness and he meant it. I'd never actually gave it to him, but I never asked for forgiveness either. There's always two people, no matter how bad the things that happened between us were when I was a kid. There are still two people involved in our lives in that journey going forward. And so there's two parts and two sides to every story. And when I did that, it opened me and my dad's relationship up to being the best relationship that I've had, and the one that I've always wanted with him. And he's my rock. Like you asked me earlier who my inspiration was. I mean, you know, it feels so good that I can call him up and just ask him a question about finances or with my own kids. Um, and the things that I'm going through sometimes with my kids now still, that he went through with his. He knows what it feels like. And so that's just really cool. And that forgiveness is just so important. So how do I display that, right, in the classroom? And one of the ways that, as educators, we got to understand that we're planting seeds when we form relationships. It doesn't happen overnight. You got a kid that's coming from you don't know what kind of situation, and they could be so angry and hating life and hating the things that are going on in their life, and you've got to earn the right to hear their story. You've got to earn their trust, and it's one day at a time. It's just loving them where they are, and knowing that you're not responsible for what their behavior is. You just got to do your part in it. And so, and what they do, I used to want to make every kid love me, and every player loved me. And if they didn't, then I thought something was wrong with me, right? And I learned that's not the case. And so there's this kid named DJ that I had in class this year, goofiest sixth grader you could ever see. He wore this bomber's jacket zipped up to the top every single day. He looked like a goofy version of Tom Cruise and Top Gun. And state testing time, the kids were allowed to bring in snacks. So that morning we had state testing. My internet wasn't working, kind of like before the show started, and I was stressed and not in a good mood and trying to get things going. And we're all just super pumped up at testing time anyway, right? And so DJ brings this like huge loaf of French bread, those $1.50 huge ones you buy from Walmart when they're on discount. He brings this huge loaf of bread into my classroom. And I looked at him, and he had this goofy smile on his face. He was so proud of that big loaf of bread. He goes, "Hey, Mr. Shu, my mom let me buy it because it was on sale." And I just lit into him. I was like, "DJ, what are you doing? This is testing time. We've got to get serious. Put that bread back in your locker. This is ridiculous." Going on. And really I was so, just messed up with the tech not going well and everything else. It wasn't DJ. And as we sat there and tested, he tested well, but the look on his face, I could tell that, because we had a really good relationship, and I could tell that he was like, "Man, Mr. Shu crushed me that this morning." And so that evening, before we went home for the day, he's in my mentor class at the end. I took him in the hallway and I said, "DJ, will you forgive me? Yeah, I shouldn't have done that. I should have let you have your bread. I should have taken the opportunity to teach everybody how to share. And we could have broke bread. You had enough for more than 5,000. You just didn't have the fishes." It was like, I should have used it for a different thing. But it was a moment that like Joe Sanfilippo said yesterday, it was a moment that I missed. And if I didn't ask for that forgiveness, DJ could have remembered that moment for the rest of his life. And that would have been his memory of me, not anything that I taught him about social studies. And so I told him that day before he left, I said, "You can bring snacks tomorrow. You bring whatever you want. I'm good. Okay, we'll have some fun." So the next morning he walks in, right? Big goofy grin. This time he doesn't have a loaf of bread. He has one of those Himalayan sea salt shakers that's about that big. And I'm thinking, what in the hell? How are you going to have salt as a snack? And I just started laughing, and he sat down, and I said, "DJ, you are the salt of the earth." And he took that salt shaker and he did this in his hand. And then he just spread it all the way around his desk. And he looked at me and he goes, "Yes, I am." And so, was that conducive to great testing and whatever? Who cares? That moment was, we were reconnected, and that relationship was repaired because I took the time to go out and say, "Hey, forgive me, man. Shouldn't have done that." And so maybe DJ down the road, when he does something wrong, can see that it's okay to ask someone for forgiveness, because those things, that forgiveness, that perseverance, that grit, that grace, we have to model those things even in the lessons that we teach to kids, how we interact with our staffs as administrators. I mean, those are the things that we have to, relate to them, because that's what they're going to use for the rest of their life. And again, they're not going to remember what we taught them. They're going to remember how we made them feel. And so, the forgiveness piece is huge, and it goes both ways. It's just not being able to forgive somebody who did you wrong. It's being able to ask that person for forgiveness too. I have to do that with people that I really didn't do a whole lot to, but in those situations in my life, I've had to go to them and say, "Hey, I just want to ask for your forgiveness." And some of them tell me to F off and go die. I mean, literally. And okay, that's fine. That's your choice, but it's off of me now.
Right.
I did my part, so it's just huge. But thanks for asking that question. I love telling about DJ and his bread.
Hey, Kip.
I love the DJ story, man. I love it. And being a middle level educator, you see a lot of wacky things, right?
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of times that the wackiest thing is very personal to that child.
Yeah.
And like you, hey, we have our moments, right?
Yeah.
But DJ's going to remember that talk in the hallway, and he's going to remember the salt more than he is the turning
Yeah. He is.
Awesome. That was awesome.
Hey, Kip, as you move forward and, you create new chapters in your life with this book, with speaking in front of people, use your past experiences. And I think Doc Parker just mentioned it earlier. Something goes into our head always. And, and I felt this when I presented a couple of weeks ago at TASSP, that imposter syndrome, that self-doubt. Like, who am I to talk to all these colleagues of mine? Who am I? Who what gives me that street cred to be able to present to you this? So how do you, what are your thoughts on this? How do you address it?
Yeah, I think I experienced the same thing. First off, if anybody listen to this, bring me into your school community. I want to share the struggle to strength with you. I think it's a powerful, just a powerful, inspirational message that not just moves you in the moment, but moves you to be a better human, a better educator, a better teacher, coach, administrator. And, that imposter syndrome, that's hard. I face that a lot, and I've got to fight that a lot. Going to this conference that I went to, the Jostens Renaissance Conference, while you were in Denver, I was in your hometown in Dallas. We switched places, and I was wondering, how do I really belong here? And I started to feel like I did. And I listened to a podcast by Ed Milet. If you ever listened to that one, look him up. And he was talking about, self-doubt is the thing that keeps us from achieving the things and the greatness that is within us, right?
Say it again.
And
who's the podcaster?
Ed Milet.
Okay.
He does a lot of things with John Gordon recently, and he has it's just a self-help, positive, inspirational thing that Darren Pepper turned me on to. And he was talking in one of the episodes that Darren actually sent me to listen to, is like, self-doubt keeps us from achieving the greatness that's within us all and achieving those dreams. And so we have to start somewhere. You've got to take action. And so one of the things he talks about is going out and touching your dream, going out and getting in the midst of where you want to be. And I thought about this week as I was in the conference at Jostens Renaissance with these people that I love. I just met online or seen online, but never met in person. And I began to feel like I belong there. But the thing is, you've got self-doubt on one side and you've got courage on the other. Self-doubt is a lie. The lie that tells you that you're not good enough, that you're not worthy. Courage doesn't mean that you aren't listening or not hearing that message or that self-doubt. Courage is the taking action, even though you're scared to death anyway. And that courage allows that energy that we all have, that greatness that we all have, to come out. And so as I still battle that from time to time, that imposter, probably like you felt when you were talking at the conference that you were mentioning. It's not about me. Like, I remember that. It's about our stories. And it doesn't matter who we are. You don't have to be a homeless alcoholic 10 years ago like me to have a story. Everybody has a story, and that is impactful and powerful to someone, but you just have to tell it, because if you don't tell your story, somebody else is going to. And so in our schools, in our school communities, we need to be telling our stories, even if it's just the little things like DJing the bread. We've got to be telling those stories so people hear those things. It's not all about I was a drunk and then I got better and all that. It's just knowing that your story is powerful and that you matter, that every single person is the greatest miracle in the world, right? Out of 17 billion, I think that's right, that have ever been on this planet from the beginning of time, we are the only ones that are exactly like us. That's pretty unique. We're one in a freaking, crap ton. And so that makes us unique and the greatest miracle right there. And so we all have, I think some people get like, you hear these stories when we go to these conferences and you hear these speakers. I mean, I listened to Joe Sanfilippo yesterday. And like, instead of thinking I'll never be like him, I thought I'm going to be him, because it's all about the narrative I tell myself. And I just watched how his cadence and how he presented. And there was, am I ever going to be him? I don't have to be him. I have to be me. And wherever that takes me is where it takes me. And so it's just, we face that imposter syndrome. We have that self-doubt. Go ahead and embrace it. But then you have to be courageous, and you have to take action and move. And you've got to know that you are worthy and that you matter. And again, we've talked about before, putting yourself around people that can help you do that. And it's something that it's not a one and done deal. I mean, I do gratitude lists every morning. I do affirmations in the morning, at night. At night before I go to bed, I write down my big win. I mean, just little things for me that always help keep me going forward in the right direction. And so, again, I think self-doubt and that imposter syndrome is a big thing for people. But remember, it's not about you. And if you're scared or afraid or worried about how you're going to be received, and you don't tell that story that one day in your classroom, and you don't take that boy out in the hallway and ask him for forgiveness, you could miss that opportunity to make an impact on their lives forever. And so again, it's just when we see that bigger picture of our why and our purpose and how many people we can impact and how it's a ripple effect that they go and impact that many more. To me, it makes that self-doubt smaller and makes that courage bigger, and I can act on it.
Thank you, Kip. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kip, you've been sharing some unbelievable insights. And first, as a math educator, you used crap ton correctly.
I did. I got a calculator, right?
that was well done. But second thing that was really powerful to me, in wrapping up that last response that you gave is controlling the narrative, right? We always talk about, and we hear about, control the narrative. We want to get out there and promote our school. We want to promote our climate. We want to promote our culture before somebody else does that. But controlling your personal narrative, goes back to everything that we've talked about so far tonight. Right. It's all about the inner peace that we have and the relationship with that inner peace with our mind and our mindset about how we're going to move forward and overcome. So I've been impacted by quite a few of your words tonight. So personally, I just wanted to say thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm truly appreciative of this interaction with you and Josh this evening. You've got your podcast, The Secret Sauce with Kip Shubert. We've got the book, right? Struggle to Strength, Finding the Ingredients to Your Secret Sauce. If you can go ahead and do a little self-promotion now, talk a little bit about where we can find the book, what it's going to do for us, and how folks can connect with you personally and or professionally.
All right, cool. Struggle to Strength, Finding the Ingredients to Your Secret Sauce. You can actually go to my website, which is www.kipshubert.com, and you can get the book there. You can obviously get it on Amazon. If you buy it on the website, it will come to you personalized and signed by me. But the book is it's kind of autobiographical in a way, but it's about some of the stories that I shared tonight on this show. But it's how we take those struggles and through the process and through time, learn to turn them into strengths where we can impact students and staff and other people. So are we frozen there?
Nope.
Get you good. We good?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You're good.
My screen was frozen, so I was just making sure we weren't. But anyway, so the book is just, I think it's a very powerful tool of empowerment. And it gives you very simple tools and strategies that you can take and reflect back on your own story and begin to use parts of that story in what you do in the classroom, or what you do in staff meetings, or what you do on an athletic field. I can't go into a 6th grade classroom and share that I was a homeless alcoholic. It's not appropriate. But I can share parts of that story without telling that part, and share and model some of those ingredients to that secret sauce that I've learned along the way through that story. I can do a lot more with my high school soccer team because it's a different age level. I can do a heck of a lot more with staffs. That's why I was saying earlier, bring me into your school, into your school community. So I can share these tools and strategies with you that you can start to take. And when we face adversity, instead of seeing how bad it is, you can see the good in it. And you can look for that lesson in it. And whatever that lesson may be, whether it's, persevering through the storm, knowing that there's going to be a rainbow at the end, that you can start beginning to share that with your students or your staff. And one thing I would encourage people to do after they read this book is to reflect on your story and begin becoming as real and authentic as you possibly can in little bits and pieces until it becomes natural and comfortable for you with your students, with your staff. They need to know that you're real. If you're having a bad day because you spilled your coffee all the way down your shirt and you stubbed your toe on the way out the door and your hair's not going right, or your kid was a jerk, and whatever it is, share that in appropriate ways with your kids, because they're going to look at you and go, man, Mr. Shu, he's real. My parents go through that too. And so it just helps you become more relatable. And, I think the books, I will tell you, the books are very quick, easy read. I don't know a lot of big words, so it's really good. You can probably read it in an afternoon or an evening. Now, Josh, he may take a couple of days, but that's okay. But most people can read it real quick. And again, I just think it leaves with you stories that you take out that perseverance, that forgiveness, that grace, that being able to dream big, dream so big they call you crazy. Those points, and that you're going to be able to relate to them in some way where you can begin to share them and share your story. And it's going to give you empowerment to do that in your school and with your school community. And it's going to help you get your mindset right, because we're going to continue to face adversity.
All right, Kip, I don't mean to be rude or anything, brother.
You got to go.
We're about to hit that cutoff time, but Kip, reach out to him at kipshubert.com. Get that book. Listen to the podcast. Most importantly, follow that man on social media. He has a lot of nuggets. But it's not over. That guy down there, he just came on. It's not over this Thursday.
I was listening the whole time, Kip. I had the pleasure of seeing you before, talking to you before, but the story is still just as passionate. Great stuff, man.
Thank
really
you,
organic and real. And I'm super proud of you, man. I'm super proud of the path you've taken.
Thank you, brother.
Remember, this Thursday, Unlock the Middle Podcast Smash 2. We got a bunch of them lined up back to back. So join us this Thursday. For Unlock the Middle. And let's take him home now before we get cut off. Thanks, Kip. Thanks, Chris. Dean. Let's go home.
Take him home. Looks good.
Thank you, Kip.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.